Welcome to Community Matters, and I'm joined today by Roman Gelperin. He is a full-time Montessori teacher and the author of 6 books focused on self-actualization. We brought him in here to talk to us about self-actualization. Roman, thank you for joining us, and please tell us more about self-actualization, something I think a lot of us hope to reach someday.
Hi, Jonjy. Great to be here. Well, self-actualization is a term that came out during the human potential movement in the 1950s and 60s. And it was coined by the American psychologist Abraham Maslow, and for him it meant 2 things. First, it was a fundamental need of human beings, an inner yearning to live up to their fullest potential. And because as you're living up to your fullest potential, your potential actually increases. It's an ongoing process. So it's called self-actualizing. As opposed to a final state that you reach, it is the process of living up to your fullest potential. That's what self-actualization meant. And second is the self-actualizing human being is the type of person living up to his fullest potential. And the psychologist Abraham Maslow also described these people. And he basically said, there's this kind of person walking around, a type of enlightened person, who lives up to his fullest potential or her fullest potential, and he has such and such character traits, and he basically sketched the personality of a particular kind of enlightened person, and he called it self-actualizing for one of their main qualities.
I like how you describe self-actualization as a process. Can you elaborate more? How do you be more self-actualized as a process, not as an ending?
Well, in one sense, it's a need. So, just like the pyramid shows, once you're pretty satisfied in the basic things you need for your survival, if you're living pretty safely and comfortably, you have friends, you have a love life, romantic relationships, you have self-esteem, then you start to get an itch, an inner itch, and if you introspect, you could feel it. Maybe a lot of people, if they just introspect, will feel this gnawing at them often, that they're not living up to their fullest potential. Basically meaning not being as remarkable as they could be in the thing they're most remarkable at. It's kind of like a multiple intelligence thing. People have these multiple intelligences, so they have a verbal intelligence, a logical mathematical intelligence, a musical intelligence, a bodily kinesthetic intelligence, and we have the potential for each, which is different. So some person might be born with an extremely high potential to be extremely intelligent, let's say mathematically. That is his path to self-actualization, to actualize and develop that intelligence. If he's not born with a very high potential for musical intelligence, that will not be his path to self-actualization. It might interest him a little, but it's not going to bring him to a state of enlightenment. And so why self-actualizing? Well, it is the process of developing your intelligence, of getting better at the thing you are potentially the best at. So, and it's a process. As you get better and better, there's more and more room to get even better. So it's the process of doing that puts people in this enlightened state of consciousness and helps them reach their fullest potential and makes them come to peace with themselves. A lot of great things start to happen when you actualize your highest potential intelligence.
So do your passion. Don't try to be someone you're not.
Exactly, and usually your passion will be that thing you're best at.
You know, a lot of people find themselves in dead-end jobs, and they have to make ends meet. How do you find your passion where you are? Is there a way to self-actualize while still being practical?
That's perfectly fine. The self-actualization is a thing that many people do not even get the opportunity to try to actualize. Again, a lot of people live at the lower need levels. They literally live there. That's what their life is structured around, and that's what their psychology is accordingly structured around satisfying. Their need for self-esteem, their need for love, their need for maybe just food and making ends meet. And if that's how far they get to within life, that's fine. That's where they landed. That said, if at all possible, people have all throughout history been striving for something higher. In addition to trying to make ends meet, they have usually some kind of religion that they practice, and that is directed to basically some kind of enlightenment, some kind of something like self-actualization, and it's a path. So even though, let's say you're on the second need, you're trying to establish stability in your life, let's say economic stability, but you should always keep in mind that this could be a transitory stage, that you're shooting to be the best possible human being you could be. Maybe you'll never reach there, but just keeping your eye on that as like a target and moving in that direction. Even if you don't ever successfully move in that direction, even if your whole life is mainly spent making ends meet and you live out your life, maybe you have a few children, fine. But just generally doing your best to move in that direction, that's the path.
What does the mold look like of achieving self-actualization? At your basic level, you have safety, but is it something that you build up to or seek, or is it more about letting go in order to get there?
Well, there's many ways to reach it, but if you're going, you could reach it by accident. So some people never pursue self-actualization or enlightenment. Self-actualization is a type of enlightenment, okay? There are other types, but it's one. And there's many ways to fall into it accidentally. For example, chronic illness. Some people get a serious illness or injury, and then they maybe by chance recover from it, and that bolts them into a state of pure ecstasy and self-actualization. They suddenly awaken to their inner selves, and they're in this expanded state of awareness, and all their powers are heightened, and then they suddenly discover their purpose in life, and they pursue it with full passion and great focus, and that happens. People accidentally stumble on self-actualization. There's also paths to do it intentionally. You could set it intentionally as your goal and pursue the state. And the state, it's more like a lifestyle plus state. What does it entail? Well, one thing it entails is reaching an basically altered state of consciousness that comes naturally to us. Pretty much all religions, at least the mystical wing of all religions, strive toward this kind of awakened state. It is a state which, awakening is a great way to describe it. People say that this state feels to regular waking consciousness the way regular waking consciousness feels to dreaming sleep. So it's like they suddenly wake up from their waking consciousness and they're like, oh my God, I didn't realize that, I thought I was awake, but now I finally am. And so you're striving for that, and your path to reach that is finding your passion, purpose, and thing you're most remarkable in life, and actualizing it, meaning developing it, bringing it into reality to the best extent you can. So if you're potentially a musical genius, pursuing that and becoming as good a musician as you possibly can be will be your path to that state and to self-actualization.
What was your path to it?
I fell into it accidentally from an injury. I basically injured my back when I was 20 years old, and I spent the next year in a lot of pain. I could hardly walk. It was just pain 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And over time, I developed the psychological skills to take care of myself and to heal myself from that injury, which I did. It basically required 24/7 focus on the state of my injury and doing nothing that aggravated it and doing everything that either didn't aggravate it or make it better. And in the course of a year or two, I eventually fully healed. And during that time, I was rocketed into a state of self-actualization and that waking up from waking life. That all happened, and I've been writing books about it and other people who've achieved that state ever since.
If you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and given the state of how much pain you were in, it was almost like you didn't have your basic needs met of safety, but then you still found a path to self-actualization, maybe through acceptance of the pain. Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a bit enigmatic, but the common factor here is that self-actualization comes from living your life to the fullest. So living your life to the fullest could mean becoming a world-class musician or a world-class composer if you're great at music. Living your life to the fullest could also be just being able to walk a little after being an invalid in your bed for years. That's also living your life to the fullest, because your life has contracted to so little. Like, the range of things you can do is so little that just being able to walk a little bit and being a little more pain-free could be living your life to the fullest. And I wrote a biography. One of my books is a biography of Alexander Solzhenitsyn. And he achieved this state of self-actualization after almost dying from cancer and then recovering from it in a Soviet chemotherapy clinic. And he wrote a poem about exactly this. It's a beautiful poem. He said, "I have learned through this where the true joy in life really lies." It's like, it lies in this like small plodding walk where I could step like a few inches forward and with one leg and a few inches forward with another leg while I was confined to my bed, my muscles atrophying for the last like few months. It lies in like being able to inhale, but not too deeply, because if I inhale too deeply, I will have a seizing pain in my lungs. But as long as I inhale calmly and shallowly, I will feel no pain. And the happiness lies also in this little tiny potato that like I managed to filch out of my soup at the mess hall in the cancer clinic. And that's basically it. He literally thought he was going to die from cancer. He was in incredible pain all the time. He recovered from it, and in the course of that recovery, living his life to the fullest was that. Having a little potato, being able to breathe without pain, walking a little on his own legs. That was it. And then he achieved a state of self-actualization, of this pure awakened state for like a couple decades, and he ended up being absolutely instrumental in practically toppling the entire Soviet Union.
What about people who maybe haven't satisfied their basic needs? We talked about safety earlier. Can they ever self-actualize if they can't get past that first hurdle of taking care of themselves? Is there no hope?
Well, a lot of people, there's many paths other than satisfying your basic needs. Generally, if you're unable to satisfy your basic needs and hardly able to survive, self-actualization is not even a concern of yours. That was the big thing about Maslow's theory, that people who've never gone above their highest needs, or like their lower needs, never even become conscious that self-actualization is a need, or any higher needs are even something contained within their organism if they've never experienced the need for it. Like a person perpetually on the verge of starvation will never even consider that something like love is important. Other people talk about it and he'll like, well, that's nonsense. Like, what really matters is getting food. And now a person who's desperately hungry for love and willing to do anything for it because he's so love deprived will not even consider that something like self-esteem is important, because, well, it's just not their concern. That's the next higher need. Then maybe if they get their love needs satisfied, then they will suddenly, this is Maslow's theory, this is why he's so famous, they suddenly awaken to a new need that's higher. Suddenly they awaken to the need for self-esteem after they have friends and are loved. Now they want to be thought well of by their friends and by themselves. But the person with acutely low self-esteem will also not become aware of the need for self-actualization until he develops a good self-image and thinks well of himself and has the respect of people. Then, only then, does the self-actualization need emerge. However, once you've already been through all those, you don't forget them. Like if you go back to a lower need, like suddenly you're in a state of starvation, or you're like in war, so there's like your safety needs, which are also right above the physiological needs like food on Maslow's pyramid. Like in a state of war, you're just like you say you're in Ukraine and your country's being bombed and you could be bombed and die any day. Then the other needs take second seat, but you're still aware of them if you've experienced them before.
There are some people out there who never get past the safety stage, maybe by perception. They have all the things they need for their personal safety, but never realize it because they always want more. Does the state of always being in lack or always wanting more get in the way of self actualization?
Enough of a lower need? Yeah. I mean, there's another self-actualization psychologist out there, uh, much more well known than me. This guy Scott Barry Kaufman, and he kind of conceived of the pyramid more like a sailboat, in which the hull of the sailboat is like your safety needs, your love needs, and your self-esteem needs, and the food needs he didn't even include there because, like, in today's day and age, people hardly even think about extreme starvation. And then he thought of the sail of the sailboat as like your self-actualization needs, and he kind of broke those down into exploration, purpose, and so on. And his idea is if you're missing something in the hull of the boat, like you're missing love or you're missing self-esteem or you're missing safety, well then it's not a good time to sail. Like, you could try, but basically your mind is going to be drawn to satisfy like your leaking ship because your foundation isn't secure, like your boat's not secure, so you can't go on sailing. And self-actualization is sailing in this metaphor.
There are some people who thought they self actualized and then they reached the pinnacle of whatever it is they wanted to do. And then maybe around midlife, they started to realize that they wanted to do something else in life, and maybe that wasn't for them. Are they running away from their fullest potential, or are they simply rediscovering where they have to be? Were they ever self actualized?
Well, it depends. I mean, that kind of thing is happening today more and more. It used to be that people would choose like one career path, one vocation, and pursue it for the rest of their lives. Now, by the time you're like 60, 70, it's a pretty good chance you're on like your fifth career or something. And I think that's a good development. And one of the things that makes it a good development is that your multiple intelligences, meaning the things you're best at, will vary at different points in your life. For example, your mathematical intelligence is pretty much shot when you hit like age 27 or so. So like the greatest mathematicians, they make all their discoveries in their early 20s. And that's it. After they reach a certain age, their brain just doesn't work as well mathematically. And, well, they could work as a mathematician, but they're not going to revolutionize mathematics. And all these things happens. Your multiple intelligences shift. Your spiritual intelligence, that's another one, will start growing much later in life usually. That's something that emerges later. And yeah, because your intelligence profile is constantly shifting, basically your self-actualization could be on very different career paths at different points in your life. And so then it becomes more, just fulfilling the call of your inner nature. Like, what is my path to self-actualization at this stage of my life? Maybe, for a good decade, it was writing these books. Now, maybe I need to have kids or something. Now, maybe I need to go into politics. That's a common thing people do later in life. That's maybe when their interpersonal intelligence flourishes. So, yeah, it's going with change. The ability to adapt to the change and realize when it's necessary is certainly a vital part to self-actualization, especially today when there's so much change both in the environment and in people.
They say that self-actualization is something you realize as you reach your fullest potential. But how do you talk to young people about this, especially children? Can they self-actualize if it's so challenging to describe to them what it is that it actually is?
How do you talk to young people about the concept of self-actualization? Yeah, so I'm an educator, a Montessori educator. And one reason I got into it is because Maria Montessori, was one of these self-actualizing people. She reached her fullest potential not through any illness. She reached it through pursuing her purpose, which she was extraordinarily good at, which was observing children. Observing children, finding out what they need for their intellectual development, and figuring out ways to supply that. And she created this whole educational system early in the 20th century, which is now the biggest, most popular form of private education in the world, specifically designed, and she says this explicitly, she doesn't use the word self-actualization, but she says it is to It is to help children reach their highest potential and become the best adults they could possibly be, and to do this at every phase in their development. And yeah, the self-actualization, there is self-actualization for, let's say, a 0 to 6-year-old child. And I mean, the child's purpose is to learn. That child is still a developing human being, and his self-actualization lies on developing the best they can and acquiring the skills and knowledge and competence they will need to be an adult. I mean, the state looks different for children. They're not like, they don't hit the awakened state of enlightenment, not usually. But still, they're in a very real sense self-actualizing. And so when can you talk to young people about self-actualizing? Basically adolescence and up. When you hit adolescence, adolescents are very interested in, well, basically finding their niche in life and finding where they could fit into society and what contribution could they make. They are extremely interested in becoming they're already interested in it. They're extremely interested in becoming the best, most powerful person they could become, and they're searching for what the hell that is. And maybe they'll come across a math textbook. And there's a lot of examples of this. They will come across a math textbook and it will immediately grab their interest, and their maybe math intelligence will be activated, and off they go to self-actualization on the math route, or they discover something else. For even younger children, it's more like role modeling. So I'm right now teaching elementary school kids, so age 6 to 12. And a big characteristic of that is hero worship. Hero worship. These kids are looking for heroes in the real world, for amazing, potentially self-actualizing people who they kind of try on and emulate. They're impressed by a person, and then they kind of role play. They think and they pretend play, and they think, what will it be to live out this person's life? Sometimes they try it on and it's not a very good fit. You know, they see a fireman and maybe they're impressed with firemen, and then they try it on, they like play fireman, pretend being a fireman. You know, I'm not really digging this fireman thing. What about like a physicist? You know, that and so they try on like this, and that's how children orient themselves to their own self-actualization. And I mean, because it's a fundamental human need, it exists in children. And yeah.
Is self-actualization the aspiration of all things?
In animals and inanimate matter, you mean? Not in the sense I'm using it. So initially, Maslow took this term from Kurt Goldstein, who was what's the word? He studied brain damaged people. He was a neurologist studying brain damaged people, and he first used the word self-actualization for these brain damaged people who suddenly lost the capacity of their brain, and they tried to do their best, even though like they couldn't like find their way around the house. They tried their best to put themselves together and to live the fullest life, most functional life they could, given their brain injury. So that's where the term self-actualization came from. And so in that sense, a lot of people who are not achieving this enlightenment, self-actualization for a brain injured person might be just being functional. For animals, it might be just living out their animal life. But I would cut off the analogy there. Animals are instinctual. They don't have any conscious drive to reach their potential or become something else. They are just acting out their instincts, and that just drives them to do what they do.
We're almost out of time, but I wanted to get your take on some of the Eastern philosophy as it relates to the intersection with self-actualization. There's a lot of emphasis on duty, or what they call dharma. And duty is what you owe to your people. And sometimes it doesn't actually jibe with your own potential. Maybe you have to take care of your family, or you have to take care of your company, or you've got to take care of people. And maybe self-actualizing is a little bit selfish. At what point does self-actualization become something impractical? And how do you reconcile it with your duty in life?
Well, a lot of times, and for most people, they are in direct opposition to, For example, yeah, it's about the eastern part of the world. There, it is pretty explicit that you have to live for, let's say, your family. Okay, you want to pursue your own self-actualization, but like you have to earn money for, I don't know, your sister's dowry or something. First obtain a career, earn your degree in engineering, then do what you want. So yeah, often they're in direct conflict, though they don't necessarily have to be. So you have relationships with people, and there's things in the world that you're sometimes called to do despite not wanting to do it and it not actualizing your fullest potential. And in one sense, you could view it as just meeting your basic needs. So like, let's say you're trying to be the best musical composer you can, and then, I don't know, someone you love gets cancer. Well, what are you going to do? Well, you have to put that on hold for a while, because like, well, life intervened. It's not always smooth, effortless sailing towards self-actualization. Sometimes other things take priority when you're in a complete crisis, or someone you love is in a complete crisis. That said, a lot of people you don't love and make very little difference in your life will tell you it's your duty to do things for them. And a lot of people buy into that, and that takes them off their path of both self-actualization or making themselves into a functional human being or being of any help to anybody in any capacity. It is just complete destruction all around. So people could be really misled by this concept of duty, that you just have to do something because you have to do it, not for any good reasons, but just because you have to, because this is what society expects from you. And basically you have to, to truly live your life and to reach self-actualization and not make your life into complete disaster. You have to evaluate all of those claims with your own free mind and your own individual basis to assess, well, what is this person worth for me? Or what is this social norm worth for me? What will happen if I violate it? Is this worth more to me than composing that symphony I was working on? And yeah, you just have to assess it individually. And sometimes a duty might properly veer you away from self-actualization because it takes precedence. And sometimes it's just something imposed on you by other people against your own good and theirs.
Roman Gelperin, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thank you very much.